Welcome to the first episode in a Legendarium series about Queen Elizabeth's conquest of Ireland. In Part 1, A Land of War, we will talk about how Ireland was divided between the Gaels and the English and how Queen Elizabeth's attempt to keep costs down made that division much worse. During the reign of King Henry II, more than 400 years before Queen Elizabeth's time, Norman adventurers carved out an enclave for themselves around the city of Dublin. By the time that Elizabeth I took the throne in 1558, two Irelands effectively existed. The English Pale around Dublin became home to English-style towns and villages governed by English common law and, of course, speaking English. Ultimately, these Old English were loyal to Queen Elizabeth. On the other hand, powerful Gaelic clans like the O'Neill and O'Donnell families ruled much of Ireland's north and west. Their people spoke various dialects of Gaelic and remained devout Catholics when the rest of the British Isles embraced Protestantism. The Gaelic parts of Ireland tended to be thinly populated, as the population made a living by herding goats and sheep and tended to move from one settlement to another depending on where the best grazing ground could be found. Yet common law and custom stretched across the North Channel into the Scottish Highlands, the islands in between Scotland and Ireland, and of course Ireland itself, which gave the region some degree of cultural unity. However, Gaelic politics tended to be intensely local, with loyalties split among numerous rival clans and chieftaincies. As such, English officials described Ireland as a land of war, inhabited by people they called the Wild Irish and imagined to be living in bogs and mountains. While we tend to imagine the reign of Queen Elizabeth as a golden age during which Shakespeare lit up the Globe Theatre with his immortal plays, and the English fleet won a great victory over the Spanish Armada, for the majority of Englishmen, Elizabeth's reign meant a time of cold weather, poor harvests, and of course high taxes, since Queen Elizabeth spent most of her reign fighting an on-again, off-again war in the Netherlands against Spain, a conflict that sometimes extended into the Caribbean. So when Queen Elizabeth tried to find a way to deal with the Irish problem, she settled on the cheapest solution possible. This displeased the Old English settlers who hoped to profit by plundering the people that they dubbed the Wild Irish. The Irish border chieftaincies remained restive, rightfully fearing that English captains intended to seize their land. In order to placate her officials and keep the government of Ireland cheap, Queen Elizabeth turned to a policy called martial law. Martial law offered Elizabeth a way to keep security costs low, for she simply needed to find a suitable representative, usually an army officer or a gentleman, and give them a commission of martial law. With this document, the representative could round up a gang of followers and sally forth into the Irish interior to cow the native lords into submission. Commissioners of martial law did not have to be paid. Rather, they collected the profits of their work, being legally entitled to what they called traitors' goods, a third of the movable goods and possessions of those they put to death for defying Queen Elizabeth's law or plundering the possessions of her subjects. This created an incentive to slaughter. The more suspected traitors the commissioners killed, the more traitors' goods they and their followers received, and predictably the more martial law became the norm in Ireland, the more violence escalated as adventurers sought to plunder the Irish. Commissioners waged what one historian has called little wars in the areas under their jurisdiction. In effect, a generation of English lords made little conquests by starting wars and then finding some excuse to put entire villages to the sword. Across Ireland, the body count grew, for native Irish rulers appeared powerless to stop their rich and ruthless neighbors. Of course, Queen Elizabeth's wars against Spain, the Netherlands, and now the Irish still proved expensive, and high taxes fell upon subjects who already frequently suffered from poor harvests brought about by the Little Ice Age. And this boded ill for Catholics, not only in Ireland, but England as well. English Catholics became the scapegoat for high taxes and endless war. Any semblance of tolerance which prevailed during the early years of Elizabeth's reign vanished like vapor. The Catholic Mass was outlawed. English Catholics could exist, but precious little else. A combination of laws and systematic discrimination made it impossible for them to hold any post of importance, whether a seat on the Queen's Council or a professorship at Oxford. Even finding regular employment could become difficult. Catholic households faced extra taxes from honest officials and an endless parade of fines from dishonest officials. Catholic manor houses grew empty as Catholic proprietors sold off one prized possession after another. Priests effectively became outlaws. Rumor warned that women who sheltered Catholic priests slept with them, that nuns carried out orgies in their convents, and that the Vatican itself hosted wine-soaked revelries. Those found sheltering a priest would be dragged unclothed onto a wooden scaffold in the public square. After being tied down before a jeering mob, an official pressed weights upon them until they died from suffocation. Priests, on the other hand, endured the horrific punishment of hanging, drawing, and quartering. After being lifted by the neck with a noose, they were dropped before suffocation, had their bellies sliced open, and their innards torn out and thrown on the scaffold, where they could watch as they died. Finally, the executioners chopped off their arms and legs while they still lived. All the while, the bloodthirsty mob roared its approval. This hatred of Catholicism among the English ruling class would eventually affect the way that England saw Ireland. English Protestants did not only see Ireland as a restive province, they saw it as a hotbed of heresy that needed to be put out. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.